Hello everyone, welcome to La Excellence IAS, the Hindu news analysis for the day, that is for 13th of May 2020. I have a small announcement to make. La Excellence IAS has come up with Prelims cum Mains batch for 2021 Prelims. The admissions have been started. You can call the numbers given in the description for further details. The discussion will go on under two subheadings. First one is deep, that is daily editorial enrichment program, where we will be discussing about important articles from the editorials, and the other important news of the day will be discussed under targeted news analysis. The respective page numbers for the Hyderabad and Bangalore edition are given adjacent to the topics. The first article for the day, getting cash transfers out of a jam. This article can be placed under General Studies Paper 2 Government Policies and Interventions and under Paper 3 Indian Economy, Inclusive Growth and Issues related to it. The issues about cash transfers, and we are going to discuss about benefits of Narega cards over the jam cash transfers. The context is PM Garib Kalyan Yojana, which is a cash relief measure wherein monthly transfer of ₹500 to women's Jan Dhan Yojana accounts was planned. The article says that Narega cards have an advantage over Jan Dhan Yojana accounts. What is JAM Trinity? It is an abbreviation for Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar and mobile. Linkage of these three entities for facilitation of direct benefit transfer of subsidies. It was envisaged as the ideal infrastructure for dispersal of subsidies. Aadhaar providing for biometric identification of the persons, while Jan Dhan Yojana account and mobile linkage providing for direct transfer of subsidies. This article says that there are certain issues involved in the JAM transfers and also tries to tell there are advantages in using Narega job cards in cash transfers over Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile. So this is the JAM Trinity, which comprises Jan Dhan Yojana accounts. Around 28 crore accounts were opened so as to financially include the previously unincluded population. A component is Aadhaar. The Aadhaar linkage has helped in tackling corruption by eliminating the leakages. Also, some of the logistic costs were saved and around 50,000 crore rupees were saved. Almost 100% of the adult population was covered under Aadhaar, which could prevent exclusion errors. Also, BHIM, that is Bharat Interface for Money, was developed as a UPI and it has more than 2 crore downloads. So this is the JAM Trinity, which was intended to facilitate direct benefit transfers of subsidies. The article mentions about various problems with respect to JAM transfers. The first and foremost is long bank queues, especially in the rural areas. These queues are going to swell further when the lockdown is lifted because of increased demand of drawing money. It also identifies other issues like non-transparency of the Jan Dhan accounts. It says that these accounts are messy. The lists are messy because it was en masse opening of these accounts in 2014-15. Some of them were opened without consent. Some of them without protection of their Aadhaar. Some duplicate accounts were also opened, and it is also doubtful how many of these accounts are active. Many of them have gone under dormancy. The other issue that this article is raising is that of exclusion errors, because only around 50% of women have got Jan Dhan Yojana accounts. This article cites studies like Yale study, which says that only 50% of the poor women have Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, and Dalberg study, which says 57% of the poor women have got Jan Dhan Yojana. Because of such less coverage, there could be possibility of exclusion errors. The article also cites inclusion errors because many of the better offs than the Narega beneficiaries are included under Jan Dhan Yojana accounts. In view of these issues, the article suggests that Narega job cards list is more transparent and is more useful in rural areas rather than the Jan Dhan Yojana accounts. While there could be some issues with respect to Narega DBTs also, similar to those of other DBT schemes, under Narega job cards, the list is transparent because it is village and Gram Panchayat identified list. Cash in hand transfer is also possible by making use of Narega job cards. The article suggests a way forward. saying that JAM is not a foolproof method. The article prefers cash transfers over JAM, at least in the near future, to avoid stress in the banking system. And it gives examples of Odisha government for pension payment and Narega wage payments in various states which occur by cash in hand. The article also suggests to make use of the complementarity between Narega and Social Security pensions to reduce the exclusion errors, because Narega would be providing for the working age population and the workers, while Social Security pensions would cover the other people. There is a complementarity between the Narega job cards and Social Security pensions which will help to reduce the exclusion errors that could be possible because of JAM transfers. The next article, Indelicate, imbalance. This article can be placed under General Studies Paper 2, Indian Polity and Governance and Separation of Powers. This is with respect to restoring connectivity in Jammu and Kashmir. Post abrogation of Article 370, internet restrictions are in place in Jammu and Kashmir. This article is criticizing about the judiciary's decision to send the question of restoring 4G connectivity in Jammu and Kashmir for review by the executive itself. It also criticizes that Supreme Court failed to discharge its duty under Article 32, that is, to enforce the fundamental rights. Going to the details of the case, the petitioners in the case called for restoration of 4G services in Jammu and Kashmir, while the government claimed that the limits were needed to prevent terrorist attacks and there were increased incidents of terrorism in the recent times. But the article questions that these incidents took place even with restrictions while they are in place. While Supreme Court noted that entire Union Territory is allowing 2G speed only, it has also acknowledged that repeated resorting to Section 144 of CRPC to impose wide restrictions on internet is unacceptable, and also that better internet facilities are necessary during the COVID-19 pandemic and the further lockdown. But it has decided to give the case to two secretaries in Union Government and Jammu and Kashmir Chief Secretary to consider the case of petitioners, whether 4G can be restored in Jammu and Kashmir or not. The article is trying to say that judiciary is abdicating from its responsibility by referring the issue to the executive again. This is in accordance with a judicial trend that has been seen recently, that is to balance between the fundamental rights and national security. The article also makes a reference to Anuradha Bhasan's case, which is also known as Jammu and Kashmir case, Jammu and Kashmir internet case, in which Supreme Court has laid down rules which required that a constant administrative review to justify the extension of such internet bans was needed, and also it required the executive to render reasons for continuance of such bans. These reasons had to be in public sphere. So Anuradha Bhasan's case, it laid down certain rules, but these rules also were not referred to in this case. This article also talks about doctrine of proportionality. This doctrine of proportionality was evolved in the Puttaswamy judgment of right to privacy. Imposing restrictions on fundamental rights should adhere to doctrine of proportionality. This doctrine requires three requisites. One thing is, a law in existence has to be there, that is legality of the decision. Second thing talks about legitimate state interest. State should be having a legitimate interest, for example, national security interest, protection of revenue, or for social welfare. Such restrictions on fundamental rights can be done. And the third requirement is that the aim has to be proportional to the restriction that we are imposing. So there should be a rational nexus between the means as well as the objects that are to be achieved. So this doctrine of proportionality also was not tested in this case. So the essence of the article is that by deferring again to the executive on Kashmir issue, the Supreme Court is abdicating its judicial responsibility. The next article, Italy, India and a common thread in partnership. This article can be placed under General Studies Paper 2, International Relations, Bilateral Relations, Agreements and Groupings. This is with respect to COVID-19 response. What are the commonalities between India and Italy? You're going to learn about what is the response in Italy, how was it similar to Indian response to COVID-19, and how the relationship between two countries can be evolved so as to guide the world political dialogues. This article is written by Italian ambassador to India. He says that there are a lot of commonalities between India and Italy. On May 4th, both the countries decided that a balance has to be struck between restoration of industrial activities and the duty of protecting their citizens. In India, lockdown 3.0 was started, and in Italy, phase 2 of COVID-19 was started on May 4th. The strategies both of them adopted was that initially societies and economies were kept on hold so as to control the disease. And in the next phase, while strengthening the preparedness and response to the pandemic, economy is being supported for growth. Both the countries have got a solid manufacturing base. The article also tries to tell about what are the various measures taken by Italy in the phase 2. Around 45 lakh people, that is 4.5 million people, got back to work and various activities were opened up. They are developing digital processes by public service employees for supporting the private sector. They have also developed a digital embassy project to support their nationals and businesses within India. The final objective is to get all the workforce to work with adequate safety measures in place. For the safety measures, a protocol was signed with the trade unions for health safety of the workers. The financial support also was garnered from national level as well as at European Union level. They tried to create liquidity for businesses and also tried to support families and MSMEs by grants, loans, debt rescheduling, etc. The support was also got from European Union. He says that the lockdown in Italy is paying out, the numbers are reducing, they are carefully following the numbers, and if there be a resurgence, restrictive measures will again have to be put in place. He also says that there are certain points of convergence between India and Italy, because of which post-COVID-19 we can evolve a multilateral system to fight the novel coronavirus and to promote a recovery which is sustainable and durable on a long basis. What are these points of convergence? First of all, we are going to hold consecutive presidencies in the G20, Italy in 2021 and India in 2022. So we can shape the international discourse around the common priorities of both countries. We can take advantage of the economic complementarity and strengthen our partnership. Also, we can promote just trade, inclusive growth, and 2030 Sustainable Development Goals realization. Climate change also will not be left out because both the countries value the climate change negotiations, and India is one of the major responsible stakeholders. He says that we have to shape our future dialogue on basic tenets of innovation and sustainability. Innovation because the crisis of COVID-19 is demanding more and more innovation, and sustainability because we did not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrowed it from our children. Riding roughshod over state governments. This article can be placed under General Studies Paper 2 and issues related to federal structure. The issue is that guidelines were given to the various states under the Disaster Management Act, and the dimension is whether these guidelines are in contrast with the federal scheme of things. We are going to understand whether the guidelines issued by the center under Disaster Management Act are counterproductive, and also to know about the separation of jurisdictions under the federal structure. In the current lockdown that is going on, the central government has mostly followed a top-down approach. During the lockdowns, it has invoked the Disaster Management Act of 2005 and given guidelines under this act to various states and districts so as to control the pandemic. The article says that this approach is counterproductive. By dividing the entire country's districts into red, orange or green zones in an area-specific manner, states and union territories are not able to further classify these districts because these districts could be very large and instead of restricting such large areas, they could have restricted small areas wherein only cases were there. There was no need of restricting the economic activity in the entire districts, only the limited area could be restricted, but states could not do it because of center's top-down approach. Even in Kerala, which was the best performing state in terms of its response to COVID-19, it was refrained from relaxing restrictions in the state. In view of all these things, the article says that the top-down approach of the central government and invoking Disaster Management Act is counterproductive. It also says that the provisions of the Constitution make it clear that issuing guidelines and directions to the states is unconstitutional. If we look at the federal scheme of India, we have 3 lists. On first list, that is the union list, Parliament can legislate on matters, while on the second list, state legislatures can legislate. While both the Parliament and state legislatures can legislate on matters under the third list, that is the concurrent list. The residuary power to legislate on matters which are not mentioned in either of the 2 lists, that is list 2 or list 3, vests with the Parliament under Article 248 of the Constitution. The Supreme Court cases in the past. In one of the cases known as Godfrey Phillips versus State of UP, the Supreme Court judgment says that the entries in these lists must be interpreted harmoniously, and whenever there is an overlap between 2 or more entries, the entry in which specific subject matter is there will be considered active over the other entry which may have more general subject matter. What does it mean? Take the example of Disaster Management Act only. It has been enacted under the residuary powers of legislation under Article 248 of the Constitution. So, Disaster Management Act is a broad act which is a general act. It is not any specific, and by virtue of being a very broad concept, maybe it can be applied to the pandemic also. But there are other specific entries. Under list 2, entry 6 speaks about public health and sanitation. So, it comes under the purview of state subject, while entry 29 of list 3 states about interstate spread of contagious or infectious diseases. That is, this being in the concurrent list, both Parliament and state legislature can legislate on these matters, and Parliament's law would prevail over the state law. So, Parliament will be competent to pass any law, to issue directions to the states to prevent the interstate spread of disease. But within the states, how to control the disease cannot be decided by the center. So, this article is trying to state that invoking Disaster Management Act to control the pandemic is unconstitutional because there are specific entries in list 2 with respect to public health and sanitation and list 3 with respect to interstate spread of disease. While center can give instructions based on the entry 29, that is to prevent interstate spread of disease, it cannot decide on how to control the disease within the states. Within the states can invoke the Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897 and take appropriate measures for arresting the outbreak in their respective states. So, center can deal only with the interstate spread of disease, not within the states. The states are not legally bound to observe the guidelines being issued by the central government. The next issue is about massive job losses following the COVID-19 lockdown. This can be placed under General Studies Paper 3 Indian Economy and Issues Related to Growth, Development and Employment. Because of COVID-19 lockdown, how the incomes and wages are being affected and how rural areas and urban areas are differing with respect to these issues is being given in this infographic. So, according to a study by Azim Premji University, COVID-19 Livelihoods Survey. You can record it, COVID-19 Livelihoods Survey. About 81% of urban workers lost their jobs during the lockdown. 81% of workers lost their jobs in the urban areas. Also, the earnings of those who are still employed fell by about 61%. There was also consumption of less food to the extent of 80%. 80% of them consumed less food in April and May. 61% couldn't buy even essentials, even weeks worth of essentials. Similar effects were felt in rural areas, but the effects in rural areas were to a smaller degree. If you see here, the increase in hunger has been more in the urban areas to the tune of 80%. 80% consumed less food in urban areas, while it was only 70% in the rural areas. Also, 61% of the 61% of the population could not buy the essentials in the urban areas, while in the rural areas it was only 34%. The deaths have increased. In urban areas, it has been 43% of population who have been exposed to debts, while in the rural area, 34% of the population took loan to cover the personal expenses for the essentials. The fall in earnings for self-employed was more for rural areas when compared to urban areas. That is minus 92% in rural areas or minus 86% in urban areas for the self-employed persons. Also, the casual workers suffered fall in earnings. This was also more in rural areas when compared to the urban areas. While the fall in wages for the wage workers was more in urban areas when compared to the rural areas. Also, the percentage of farmers who were not able to harvest or sell their produce or sold it at reduced prices was more in urban areas when compared to that in rural areas. Coming to the comparison on job loss in the urban areas, the most affected were self-employed, 84% of them not working now, and then casual employees, around 81% of whom are not working now, and among the regular salaried employees, 76% of them are not working during the lockdown. Coming to the job loss in rural areas, maximum who suffered was casual workers, around 66% of them were not working, while regular salaried employees 62% were not working, and among the self-employed only 47% were not working. So majority of the self-employed, that is 53%, are still working in the rural areas, while in the urban areas self-employed are the worst hit if you compare between the both datas. Try to remember the deviations where urban areas are affected more and where rural areas are affected more, so that you can write them in your answers. The next article, Do Numbers Matter in Rajya Sabha? This article can be placed under General Studies Paper 2, Indian Polity and Governance, and Structure, Functioning and Powers and Privileges of the Parliament. The issue is about how the functioning of Rajya Sabha has been. The dimension is productivity of Rajya Sabha in its various roles. So we are going to learn about the efficacy and productivity of Rajya Sabha and its functioning. The article written by Mr. M. Venkaiah Naidu, who is the Vice President of India and also the Chairman of Rajya Sabha, tries to discuss about whether Rajya Sabha's functioning has been obstructing the government of the day in functioning effectively. There are some points in favor of Rajya Sabha and there are some points against Rajya Sabha. The proponents of Rajya Sabha say that delaying of passage of laws is for better deliberation of the issues. Also, they say that lower house is prone to the passions of the present moment and political considerations which are impending then, because Lok Sabha has got periodic elections before which it is dissolved, and as a result the Lok Sabha's bills will reflect the recent will of people, not considering future demands. While Rajya Sabha being a permanent body, it maintains continuity. It has got both old as well as new members and conveys the will of the people but over different phases. Rajya Sabha secretarial analysis has shown that in the past 68 years of its existence, Rajya Sabha has come into existence on 13th of May 1952. So it has been 68 years from its existence. In these 68 years, only in 29 years, government of the day had majority in Rajya Sabha, while for 39 years, government of the day was in minority, and in the last 31 years, it was a continuous period. Despite so many years, the Rajya Sabha has impacted very few legislations adversely. For this reason, there is no need to call Rajya Sabha to be an obstructionist. Also, there have been only 3 joint sittings so far to resolve differences. One in 1961 for the passage of Dowry Prohibition Bill, it was defeated in Rajya Sabha because Lok Sabha did not agree to the recommendations made by Rajya Sabha. In 1978, there was another joint sitting for Banking Services Commission Repeal Bill wherein Rajya Sabha has rejected the bill. In 2002, Prevention of Terrorism Bill also was rejected by Rajya Sabha. So, only in these three cases, three joint sittings were held so far, which shows that Rajya Sabha has not always played an obstructionist role. Also, by delaying, Rajya Sabha is checking on hasty legislations. The example for this is Prevention of Corruption Bill of 1987. Also, if we see, the current government, which is not having numbers in Rajya Sabha, has passed many landmark legislations like GST, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, Triple Talaq, Citizenship Amendment Act, Reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir, all these without having obstruction from Rajya Sabha. So, we can say that Rajya Sabha has not been obstructionary in its approach. But there are certain concerns as well. It was called regressive when it rejected 24th Constitution Amendment Bill in 1970 for abolishing the privy purses to the erstwhile rulers. Also in 1989, the 64th and 65th Constitutional Amendment Bills seeking to empower the local governments were rejected by Rajya Sabha. So, in these issues, the Rajya Sabha was considered as regressive and as an obstructionist. Also, there have been increasing disruptions. Till 1997, the productivity was almost 100%, which fell to 61% by 2015 to 19. While the time for legislation has remained the same, the time for oversight function has reduced from 40% to 12%. So, for passing legislations, the time has remained same, but for oversight function, the time has reduced, mainly because of disruptions causing the cancellation of question hours. They are denting the quality because there is decreased time for discussion. Rajya Sabha is becoming more and more deliberative body by continuing 0 hours, short duration discussions and special mentions. But by decreasing the duration of question hours, the oversight function is declining. Resolutions have been passed in the past for doing away with the institution of Rajya Sabha various times, but all these times Rajya Sabha managed to prevail. There was also a dent of cordiality between the two houses when in 1952 Rajya Sabha was not included in Public Accounts Committee, and in 1953 the questions on certification of IT Amendment Bill as a money bill were raised in Rajya Sabha. Despite all these initial frictions, now both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha are emerging as constructive partners guided by cooperation, and Rajya Sabha cannot be called obstructive. The article is giving a way forward so as to decrease the disruptions in Rajya Sabha, especially those that are driven by political passions. Coming to a brief comparison between Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, though the constitution tries to establish parity in powers between both these, the composition of these houses is quite different, because Lok Sabha is a directly elected body while Rajya Sabha is indirectly elected by the state legislators. Also, there is a difference with respect to certain powers, especially with regard to money bills and finance bill, where Lok Sabha has a major say and it can vote upon demand for grants, while these powers are not there for Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha could best hold these bills for 14 days and return to Lok Sabha with or without amendments, while amendments may or may not be accepted by Lok Sabha. While Rajya Sabha also has got some additional powers under Article 249 of Constitution, where it can pass a resolution so that Parliament is authorized to make a law under the state subject. Also, under Article 312, Rajya Sabha can authorize the Parliament to create a new All India service. Also, when Lok Sabha is dissolved, proclamations of emergency and President's rule have to be approved by Rajya Sabha. So, these are some of the differences in powers between Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And this article says that Rajya Sabha numbers have not affected the functioning of the Parliament from 1950s onwards, and it has been playing a constructive role in the law making. It is not the obstructionist role that is predominant, it is playing a constructive role, and it was obstructionist or regressive in very few instances. The next article is GI tag for Shorai Kovar painting and Telia Rumal. This issue can be placed under General Studies Paper 3, issues relating to intellectual property rights, and we are going to learn about the uniqueness of these two products. So this picture is that of a Telia Rumal. It is from Telangana. It is a cloth which involves intricate handmade work. It is made from a cotton loom. It displays various designs and motifs. Mainly 3 colors are there in this: red, black and white. It was during the Nizam's dynasty that in a small village named Puttapaka, a backward village of Telangana state, only about 20 families were engaged in the handloom weaving. These were patronized by the Muslim families and Nizam rulers. The officers working in the court of the Nizam also would wear these Telia Rumals as a symbolic representation of their status. The second picture is that of Shorai Kovar. It is a traditional and ritualistic mural art. Mural art is a painting which is drawn directly on the wall. It is practiced by local tribal women either during the harvest or during the marriage seasons. It is practiced widely in the Hazaribagh district of Jharkhand. It is traditionally painted on the walls of mud houses. Here you can see a mud house on the wall of which this painting has been done. Of late they are seen on other surfaces also. This has got various animal figures or plants or lines and dots which reflect religious icons. What do you understand by geographical identification tag? It is a unique identification given to a product which could be natural, cultivated or manufactured. This identification is given based on their origin, place of origin. It has got certain advantages to the consumers that the best quality product which is authenticated is assured to them. The advantage to producers is that their prosperity, economic prosperity is increased because of increased demand driven by the tag status. It also prevents unauthorized usage of these products by others under this name. GI tag is regulated at the international level by agreement on trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, that is known as TRIPS of WTO, and at the national level it is regulated by Geographical Indication of Goods Registration and Protection Act of 1999. The next article, India may miss nutrition targets. This article can be placed under General Studies Paper 2, Social Justice, issues related to poverty and hunger. The issue is about Global Nutrition Report which was released on Tuesday, and we are going to learn about India's performance in various nutritional indicators and also about the Global Nutrition Report. This report is a mechanism for tracking the commitments made by 100 stakeholders, among which are governments, aid donors, civil society, the United Nations and businesses. It will track the progress of global nutrition targets which are established by World Health Assembly. It was released on Tuesday and it has highlighted the inequalities in malnutrition being highest in India. India is also placed among the 88 countries which are going to miss the targets by 2025. What are these targets? In 2012, World Health Assembly, 6 targets have been set which include stunting, anemia, low birth weight, childhood overweight, exclusive breastfeeding and child wasting. These are the various parameters for which targets have been set. India has got data for 4 parameters and India is going to miss these targets by 2025. The 4 parameters for which data is available for India are stunting, anemia, childhood overweight and exclusive breastfeeding. While the status of underweight of both boys and girls in India has improved, it is still high when compared to the Asian counterparts. Around 38% of Indian population is stunted or Indian children are stunted. Stunting refers to decreased height for their age. Okay, decreased height for the age is known as stunting. So 38% of Indian children are stunted and 21% of them are wasted. What is wasting? Wasting is the weight for height. for one particular height, what the weight should be, it is less than that. So 21% of the children are wasted and 50% of the women in the reproductive age group are anemic. Anemia refers to less than the required hemoglobin concentration in the blood. So all these factors are much less than Asia's average. While these are showing low nutrition status, there has been overweight and obesity also affecting 1/5 of the population. These figures show that there is a marked contrast among different people of India. This marked contrast is placing India among 3 worst countries along with Nigeria and Indonesia, which is showing that there is 4-fold variation among 2 extremes, or between the 2 extremes there is a 4-fold variation in these 3 countries, Nigeria, Indonesia and India. That is the inequalities in malnutrition. At one end of the spectrum there is overweight and obesity, at the other end there is stunting, wasting and anemia. For example, the stunting level in UP is more than 40%, and while in the lower income group it is double, percentage is double when compared to the higher income group. In lower income group it is 50%, while in the higher income group it is only 22%. It is also 10% higher in the rural areas. When it is coming to obesity, around 5.1% of females are obese when compared to 2.7% of males. It is showing that twice the number of females are affected with obesity when compared to males. So the article says that equity has to be promoted to address the malnutrition. The next article, PM announces rupees 20 lakh crore economic stimulus package. This is a topic under General Studies Paper 3 Indian Economy, issues related to mobilization of resources, growth and development. The issue is COVID-19 and we are talking about the economic stimulus package that has been announced by the Prime Minister. The various focus points which are raised by the Prime Minister to revive the economy from lockdown. The Prime Minister said that there will be a new look lockdown 4.0 after May 17th. That is, the lockdown will continue but with restrictions which are different from now. He also announced a 20 lakh crore package. 20 lakh crores means 10% of India's GDP for the economic recovery of the country. This 20 lakh crore package is inclusive of RBI measures and also the previous package under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. This package is intending to make India a self-reliant country. Otherwise, he also called it as Atmanirbhar Bharat. This is going to be based on, this self-reliance is going to be based on 5 pillars. The 5 pillars being economy, infrastructure development, demography, technology-driven systems, and strengthening the demand and supply chains. And these supply chains have to be developed based on local sourcing. The Prime Minister said that there will be bold reforms, not incremental changes. There will be bold reforms of land, labor laws and liquidity so as to enable the economy to grow faster. It is to facilitate the workers, the various workers like migrant workers, street workers, daily wagers, as well as to protect the industry and to protect the honest taxpayers. Prime Minister also asked to identify how local chains have helped us during this phase of lockdown and hence emphasized on buying local. The Prime Minister said that India got an opportunity of looking at other countries' systems and institutions, how they crumbled after COVID-19 pandemic, and hence we could take measures immediately of lockdown and then furthering the economic stimulus. He also said that 21st century is really heading to become India's century by means of self-reliance. He also gave the example of ramped up production in this lockdown period of PPE kits and N95 masks. When the disease or when the COVID-19 entered India, we were not producers of these kits, but now we are producing 2 lakhs each of PPE kits and N95 masks now. He also tried to emphasize that self-reliance is not exclusionary. It is going to impact the world in a positive way. By India becoming self-reliant, we are only going to help the world out. We are not going to be exclusionary. The next article, India caught in US-China spat over Taiwan's status at WHO. This article can be placed under General Studies Paper 2, International Relations and Effects of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests. The issue is USA and China relations, how they are going to affect India's relation with these countries. We are going to understand what is the spat between US and China over Taiwan and its impact on India. Let us have a brief background of what is China-Taiwan issue. There was a government known as Kuomintang government in China between 1927 and 1949. In 1949, because of the civil war, the communist armies under Mao Zedong overthrew this Kuomintang government, which retreated to Taiwan and made it their seat of government. While the communists who emerged victorious have declared People's Republic of China in the mainland China. Both the sides said that they represented all of China. Initially, many governments including US have recognized Taiwan because they shied away from communist ideology of China. But later on, because of the diplomatic demands, China and United States were drawn together. As a result, the United States has cut its ties with Taipei in favor of Beijing. Taipei is the capital of Taiwan, so it has cut its ties with Taipei in favor of China. Now, because of the differences between US and China, following COVID-19 pandemic, USA is trying to leverage Taiwan to pressure China now. China's stand is that there is only one China and Taiwan is an intrinsic part of China. China also put forward a formula which is known as one country, two systems, under which both Beijing and Taipei agree that Taiwan belongs to China. While Taiwanese leaders try to maintain formal diplomatic relations with the major powers as well as the international organizations because they want to survive separately from the communist mainland. While India's response to one China policy is that India has accepted one China policy that accepts Taiwan as well as Tibet as a part of China. But it also uses the policy to make a diplomatic point that if India believes in one China policy, China should also believe in a one India policy. The issue is that USA is trying to garner support for inclusion of Taiwan as an observer member at the World Health Assembly. While India, which is going to chair the executive body of the World Health Organization for the next 3 years, is going to have a great say in this. India, if it is doing so, it will be violative of one China principle of China, because of which the relations between India and China may get disturbed, and as a result, it is said that India is being caught in the US-China spat over the Taiwan status at WHO. Let us have two prelims practice questions. Consider the following statements about the Shorai and Kovar paintings which recently received the GI tag. It is usually done before the monsoon season as a prayer for better rains. This is a wrong statement because these paintings are done after the monsoon season once the walls are replastered. These are done by the tribal women of the tribes belonging to Mundas, Santhals, Orans and other tribes of the region of Jharkhand. Hazaribagh district of Jharkhand is famous for these paintings. So the correct statement is B, 2 only. Let us look at the next question. The Israeli-Palestine conflict is always a bone of contention between the two nations, which again has been evident in the killing of an Israeli soldier recently by a Palestinian. In this context, select with which among the following the area currently under occupation by Palestine shares its borders. The options are Mediterranean Sea, Jordan, Dead Sea and Egypt. The area currently under the Palestinian occupation consists of mainly two parts, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. This is the West Bank and this is the Gaza Strip region. So if you see, Mediterranean Sea is in contact with Gaza Strip, while Jordan is having a border with West Bank. Dead Sea, this is Dead Sea, which is also having a border with West Bank, and Egypt is having a border with Gaza Strip. So the correct answer is all four, 1, 2, 3 and 4.